Hi, this is Muscle Phil back again, and we've been spending a lot of time organizing Hedgehog and Otter in such a way that it's a cute little book, kind of like a bookseller's stall in a big outdoor book sale. We've got new children's books, and we put books in an order where you can find them, and you'll find me at Hedgehog and Otter at least some of the time. And the other thing we've done is we're focusing on more and more media production. And so like the book stall is in the front, and I'm doing the media production in the back. Now, I got some feedback on the Confederate Memorial Controversy video from a professor of mine, and I have been working on the story that I started 30 years ago. But I've also been working in a grant writing course, which is exceedingly useful, but in some ways like playing continuous 5-minute chess or something really involving. But while all of these things were going on in my life, this wonderful thing happened. It's a story I'm going to use to make a point. I was up, I was sort of thinking about different ideas and literary terms and how I would make an argument about something, and getting along with people that I had to get along with because it benefited us all. And my wife got up, and I noticed that she was, it makes an eerie light when you hold a Kindle Fire under your chin and read it in a dark room. And what had happened was we had set a timer. We had pre-purchased a book by the author Philip Pullman. It's called His Dark Materials. Now, if you like Philip Pullman, he's sort of like the kind of writer like George R.R. Martin, the Game of Thrones writer, or J.R.R. Tolkien 60 years ago when you read, when people, 60 years ago when people, 65 years ago, when people first read Lord of the Rings. And you want that book. You know, you break in a room to get it. You're waiting for it. But technology had changed to such a point and advanced so much recently that we had set up our Amazon account in such a way that it would automatically deliver Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials to us, to our account via wireless, and it would be accessible to both my wife and I. Now I want to talk a little bit more about Amazon Kindle and some of the advantages of it, with the hope that maybe at some point Amazon will actually pay me to do this kind of work. There's kind of a double-edged advantage, the triple-edged advantage to the Kindle system. And for example, with myself, I'm older than I'm going to admit, and so I wouldn't be able to read a whole book in a day. But I have a mixed set of abilities. I've talked about my dyslexia before, but I've also made the point that I've been tested to have what they call, I have listening abilities, at least as far as listening to speech to text, that borders on a superpower. Now, in some of my social engagements recently, it's been suggested that maybe that doesn't transcribe to real life. But what that's meant is that I got the book, I guess, last night. I want to recommend this book. I'm just going to hold it up. It's called The Dyslexic Advantage. And if you have any hint that someone you love or yourself or anyone near you has a particular kind of learning disability described as dyslexia, you should read this book. Because often what it means with a learning disability, as far as this author, he's a doctor, a dyslexic doctor like myself, a high-functioning dyslexic, referred this book to me. And what it means is, as far as one way of thinking of a learning ability, is some things that everybody else seems to learn and can do. You have to learn new every time. Like finding this book. You know, I spent 15 minutes looking for this book, and it was over in a corner. But on the other hand, I am able to read this book, Philip Pullman's Dust, like there's a theater in my head. And I can tell you that the fictionalized version of Oxford, the way he ties Dust into the other 3 books, is magnificent. He has a sense of place where you see Oxford in his secondary multi-dimensional world as if you're living it through the viewpoint of an 11-year-old female character. And I couldn't read it all because I had other things to do, but I can say I can't wait to get back to it. And this was delivered to me through a technology which I studied as a graduate student 20 years ago, and I am now going to be applying to doing a study on internet and technological resources for Afro-American religious studies. So it's almost like, for someone like me, the internet is driven by something that most people have never heard of. It's called Moore's Law, and it was announced, it was discovered in 1967 that basically in constant 1967 dollars, the computing power available to us doubles about every 18 months. And so awesome technology that I hold now in my hand to talk about this book that I got automatically delivered to me last night, and I can talk with others about it more, about the way the story unfolds. But it's one of those kind of books that if you had a really bright young adult reader, you could read it and share it with them. And Philip Pullman writes in a way, the Hunger Games, for example, is called a young adult novel, but it's far too brutal and it's far too ugly. It's a good story, but it's not a young adult novel by any means. It's more like an adult fantasy. But this is like Tolkien. It's like Tolkien for the 21st century, and it's not stodgy. The characters are described in an amazingly accessible way. I mean, I'm not talking too technically about the book, but I'm talking more about the technology. I want to say one other thing about this business of being a book reviewer. Sometimes you have disappointments. And I had a disappointment a little while ago because somebody misunderstood what I did as a book reviewer. They thought I produced free commercials for them, and he was wondering how he could use me. On the other hand, C.L. Lewis is a writer who I reviewed a little while ago, and she's a sister of one of my best friends, Joe Krazaz, who's going to be so embarrassed when he hears me quote him. But he said, well, you know, my 78-year-old sister wrote this book, and I don't know what the hell it's about. And I read it and I knew what it was about. It's a profoundly religious book where a very deep and moving person expresses a spiritual doubt state called the long dark night of the soul. But she has a spiritual courage not to give up. Now apparently something I said in my Amazon review may have gotten her a book contract. I don't know the exact term. But what I want to say in the little Amazon review I did, I said, you know, she really should have an author page. This woman needs some attention. And just as my associate Serena walked into the office, I was elated to find this picture of this cute little 78-year-old woman who's now got her author page. And, you know, I guess if I think about it, I'm going to kind of champion her career because we need more poets like that. And it lifted me up and it made my day. I am trying to work with authors of character, hoping that I can help them to get out in a world of publishing which is confused and difficult. And the problem with most acquisition editors, and I know some of them, and I've been an editor, is that they look for things to exclude manuscripts for. Not enough of this, not enough of that, 70% of this, and they miss a lot of stuff. And then it's like Lord of the Rings. When it was when Tolkien first got his contract to publish this in the early 50s, they gave him the sucker contract because they thought it would be kind of a public good to have this book out here that nobody would read. It would make them look good as a publisher. And it turns out that he made a lot of money because there really was a need for that kind of fantasy. It got even funnier than that because he made a lot of money and he spent it all right away, and then he owed the taxes on it. So that is how there became a Tolkien archive at Marquette University. He had to sell off most of his manuscripts in order to pay the taxes on the sales he has had. But there's always there's that fracture in market capitalism where something, like the Twilight books or something like that, where you'd never expect them to fit in, and people like them. And as a reviewer, that's the kind of thing I'm looking for. And no, I don't make promos or commercials. I talk about books, and when I see stuff I believe in, like, okay, Fred Schwartzpitz. He's a Madison cab driver that I've known for probably 35 years. He's got a book that came out in 2007 called Vampire Cabbie. I've already done one review of it for another source. And it's really a pretty good book. His characters are done very well. And if you went to University of Wisconsin-Madison, if you've had any Madison experience, that book is for sale on Amazon. And Fred should be encouraged because it's a local place, local dark fantasy, an interesting vampire character. And there's a lot of stuff like that out there. Now, that's not the only thing I want to do. I want to do art books, and I want to do, just anything, military history. But that's what I'm talking about today. And this experience kind of overrided the disappointment of misunderstanding.